viewers, and welcome to another chapter of reading. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 35, King's Cross. He lay face down, listening to the silence. He was perfectly alone. Nobody was watching. Nobody else was there. He wasn't perfectly sure he was there himself. A long time later, or maybe no time at all, it came to him that he must exist, must be more than disembodied thought, because he was lying, definitely lying on some surface. Therefore he had a sense of much, and the thing against which he lay existed too. Almost as soon as he reached this conclusion, Harry became conscious that he was nude. Convinced as he was of his total solitude, this didn't concern him, but it did intrigue him slightly. He wondered whether, as if he could feel, would be able to see. In opening them, he discovered that he had eyes. He lay in a bright mist, though it wasn't like mist he had ever experienced before. His surroundings weren't hidden by cloudy vapor. Rather, the cloudy vapor hadn't formed into surroundings yet. The floor on which he lay seemed to be white, neither warm nor cold, but simply there. A flat, blank something on which to be. He sat up. His body appeared unscathed. He touched his face. He wasn't wearing glasses anymore. Then a noise reached him through the unformed nothingness that surrounded him. The small, soft thumplings of something that flapped, failed, and struggled. It was a pitiful noise, yet also slightly indecent. He had the uncomfortable feeling that he was eavesdropping on something perverted, shameful. For the first time he wished he were closed. Barely had the wish formed in his head than ropes appeared a short distance away. He took them and pulled them on. They were soft, clean, and warm. It was extraordinary how they appeared, just like that, the moment he had wanted them. He stood up looking around. Was he in some great room of requirement? The longer he looked, the more there was to see. A great domed glass roof glittered high above him in sunlight. Well, if you can't tell, it's currently sunny. I just have blinds up because I wouldn't be able to tell you wouldn't be able to see me practically. I'd be a little bit obscured. But moving on. Perhaps it was a palace. All was hushed and still, except for those odd thumping and whimpering noises coming from somewhere close by in the mist. Harry turned slowly on the spot, and his surroundings seemed to invent themselves before his eyes. A wide open space, bright and clean, a hall larger than the great hall by far, with that clear domed glass ceiling. It was quite empty. He was the only person there except for... He recoiled. He spotted the thing that was making the noises. It had the form of a small, nude child curled on the ground. Its skin raw and rough, flayed looking, and it lay shuddering under a seat where it had been left. Unwanted, stuffed out of sight, struggling for breath. He was afraid of it. Small, fragile, and wounded though it was, he didn't want to approach it. Nevertheless, he drew slowly nearer, ready to jump back at any moment. Soon he stood near enough to touch it, yet couldn't bring himself to do it. He felt like a coward. He ought to comfort it, but it repulsed him. You cannot help. He spun around. Albus Dumbledore was walking toward him, sprightly and upright, wearing sweeping robes of midnight blue. Ooh, I love that color. That That is one of my favorite shades of blue. I just love it. Harry. He spread his arms wide, and his hands were both whole, white, and undamaged. You wonderful boy. You brave, brave man. Let us walk. Stunned, Harry followed as Dumbledore strode away from where the boy child were whimpering, leading him to two seats that Harry hadn't previously noticed, set some distance away under that high sparkling ceiling. Dumbledore sat down in one of them, and Harry fell into the other, staring at his old headmaster's face. Dumbledore's long silver hair and beard, the piercingly blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles, the crooked nose, everything was as he remembered it. And yet... But you're dead, said Harry. Yes, said Dumbledore matter-of-factly. Then I'm dead too. Ah, said Dumbledore, smiling still more broadly. That is the question, isn't it? On the whole, dear boy, I think not. This exchange reminds me of to be or not to be. That is the question from Hamlet. But moving on, because this is obviously Potter and not Shakespeare. Although if you are interested in me reading Shakespeare, please let me know in the comments. I would love to bring some Shakespeare to life. Just note that not all of it may be glamorous. But seriously though, let me know your Shakespeare recommendations in the comments. I would love to bring them to life for you guys. But on to Potter. They looked at each other, the old man still beaming. Not, repeated Harry. Not, repeated not, said Dumbledore. But Harry raised his hand instinctively toward the lightning scar. It didn't seem to be there. But I should have died. I didn't defend myself. I meant to let him kill me. And that, said Dumbledore, will I think have made all the difference. Happiness seemed to radiate from Dumbledore like light, like fire. Harry had never seen the man so utterly, so palpably content. Explain, said Harry. But you already know, said Dumbledore. He twiddled his thumbs together. And let him kill me, said Harry. Didn't I? You did, said Dumbledore, nodding. Go on. So, the part of his soul that was in me... Dumbledore nodded still more enthusiastically, urging Harry onward, a broad smile of encouragement on his face. Has it gone? Oh, yes, said Dumbledore. Yes, he destroyed it. Your soul is whole and completely your own, Harry. But then... Harry glanced over his shoulder to where the small maimed creature trembled under the chair. What is that, Professor? Something that is beyond either of our help, said Dumbledore. But if Voldemort used the killing curse, Harry started again, and nobody died for me this time, how can I be alive? I think you know, said Dumbledore. Think back. Remember what he did in his ignorance, his greed, and his cruelty. Harry thought. He let his gaze drift over his surroundings. If it was indeed a house in which they sat, it was an odd one, with chairs set in little rows and bits of railing here and there. Yet still, Dumbledore, and the stunted creature under the chair were the only beings there. Then the answer rose to his lips easily, without effort. You took my blood, said Harry. Precisely, said Dumbledore. He took your blood and rebuilt his living body with it. Your blood in his veins, Harry. Lily's protection inside both of you. He tethered you to life while he lives. I live while he lives. But I thought it was the other way around. I thought we both had to die. Or is it the same thing? He was distracted by the whimpering and thumping of the agonized creature behind them, and glanced at it yet again. Are you sure we can't do anything? There is no help possible. Then explain more, said Harry, and Dumbledore smiled. You were the 7th Horcrux, Harry. The Horcrux he never meant to make. And I am glad you have waited, because it definitely should have paid off. If you think about it, Harry had to be in Gryffindor. Because when you consider the other Horcruxes, Slytherin's Locket, Ravenclaw's Diadem, Hufflepuff's Cup, if Harry was made into a Horcrux, he had to be in Gryffindor to complete all 4 Hogwarts houses in his collection of Horcruxes. If Harry was in Slytherin, it would have thrown it off balance. Fate dictated that Harry be in Gryffindor because Voldemort made Harry the indirect Horcrux, and therefore it completes his Hogwarts Horcrux set. Because again, there's Ravenclaw's Diadem, Slytherin's Locket, and Hufflepuff's Cup. All 3 of those have connections to the founders, because Slytherin's Locket is from Salazar Slytherin. Rowena Ravenclaw's Diadem became a Horcrux. Helga Hufflepuff's Cup became a Horcrux. And because the Sword of Gryffindor cannot be a Horcrux, Harry himself represents Gryffindor in that set of Horcruxes. And therefore, Harry being in Gryffindor, again, completes the Hogwarts set. That is pure genius of JKR. I love it. And whether you are realizing this because of me telling you or because you've thought about it for a while but couldn't piece the words, you are welcome. Because I have thought ostensibly on this. And I think it shows. But, moving on. He had rendered his soul so unstable that it broke apart when he committed those acts of unspeakable evil. The murder of your parents, the attempted killing of a child. But what escaped from that room was even less than he knew. He left more than his body behind. He left part of himself matched to the would-be victim who had survived. And his knowledge remained woefully incomplete, Harry. That which Voldemort doesn't value, he takes no trouble to comprehend. Of house elves and children's tales from love, loyalty, and innocence, Voldemort knows and understands nothing. Nothing. But they all have a power beyond his own. A power beyond the reach of any magic is a truth he has never grasped. He took your blood, believing it would strengthen him. He took into his body he took a part of his enchantment into his. He took a tiny part of the enchantment your mother laid upon you when she died for you into his body. His body keeps her sacrifice alive. And while that enchantment survives, so do you, and so does Voldemort's one last hope for himself. Dumbledore smiled at Harry, and Harry stared at him. And you knew this? You knew all along? I guessed. But my guesses have usually been good, said Dumbledore happily, and they sat in silence for what seemed like a long time, while the creature behind them continued to whimper and tremble. There's more, said Harry. There's more to it. Why did my wand break the wand he borrowed? As to that, I can't be sure. Have a guess then, said Harry, and Dumbledore laughed. Yes, have a guess, Dumbledore. What you must understand, Harry, is that you and Lord Voldemort have journeyed together into realms of magic hitherto unknown and untested. But here is what I think happened, and it is unprecedented. No wand maker could, I think, ever have predicted it or explained it to Voldemort. Without meaning to, as you now know, Lord Voldemort doubled the bond between you when he returned to a human form. A part of his soul was still attached to yours, and thinking to strengthen himself, he took a part of your mother's sacrifice into himself. If he could only have understood the precise and terrible power of that sacrifice, he would not perhaps have dared to touch your blood. But then, if he had been able to understand, he couldn't be Lord Voldemort, and might never have murdered at all. Having ensured this twofold connection, having wrapped your destinies together more securely than two wizards were ever joined in history, Voldemort proceeded to attack you with the wand that shared a core with yours. And now something very strange happened, as we know. The cores reacted in a way that Lord Voldemort, who never knew that your wand was twin of his, had never expected. He was more afraid than you were that night, Harry. You had accepted, even embraced, the possibility of death. Something Lord Voldemort has never been able to do. Your courage won. Your wand overpowered his, and in doing so, something happened between those wands. Something that echoed the relationship between their masters. I believe that your wand imbibed some of the power and qualities of Voldemort's wand that night, which is to say that it contained a little Voldemort himself. So your wand recognized him when he pursued you, recognized a man who was both kin and mortal enemy, and it regurgitated some of his own magic against him. Magic much more powerful than Lucius's wand had ever performed. Your wand now contained the power of your enormous courage and of Voldemort's own deadly skill. What chance did that poor stick of Lucius Malfoy stand? But if my wand was so powerful, how come Hermione was able to break it? Asked Harry. My dear boy, it's remarkable that effects were only directed at Voldemort, who had tempered so ill-advisedly with the deepest laws of magic. Only toward him was that wand was abnormally powerful. Otherwise it was a wand like any other. Though a good one, I'm sure. Dumbledore finished kindly. Harry sat in thought for a long time, or perhaps seconds. It was very hard to be sure of things like time. You killed me with your wand. You vowed to kill you with my wand, Dumbledore corrected Harry. I think we can agree that you are not dead, though of course, he added as if fearing he had been discourteous. I do not minimize your sufferings, for which I am sure were severe. I feel great at the moment, though, said Harry, looking down at his clean, unblemished hands. Where are we exactly? Well, I was going to ask you that, said Dumbledore, looking around. Where would you say that we are? Until Dumbledore asked, Harry hadn't known. Now, however, he found that he had an answer ready to give. It looks, he said slowly, like King's Cross Station, except it's a lot cleaner and empty. There are also no trains as far as I can see. King's Cross Station, Dumbledore was chuckling immoderately. Good gracious, really? Well, where do you think we are? asked Harry and Nettle defensively. My dear boy, I have no idea. This is, as they say, your party. Well, if I were there, my party would say... I think my party would say... Gee, what would my party say? Hmm. Maybe an ice palace. That would be pretty. And yes, this is my love of Frozen talking. Because if you know Frozen as much as I do, you know Elsa builds an ice palace, so I would say an ice palace. But moving on before I get distracted. Welcome to ADHD life. Harry had no idea what this meant. Dumbledore was being infuriating. He glared at him, then remembered a much more pressing question than that of their current location. The Deathly Hallows, he said, and he was glad to see that the words wiped the smile from Dumbledore's face. Ah, yes. He said he even looked a little worried. Well, for the first time Harry met Dumbledore, he looked less than an old man. Much less. He looked tweeny like a small boy caught in wrongdoing. Can you forgive me? He asked. Can you forgive me for not trusting you? For not telling you? Harry, I only feared that you would fail as I had failed. I only dreaded that you would make my mistakes. I crave your pardon, Harry. I have known for some time now that you are the better man. What are you talking about? Asked Harry, startled by Dumbledore's tone, by the sudden tears in his eyes. The Hallows, murmured Dumbledore. A desperate man's dream. But the real dangers in a lure for fools, said Dumbledore. And I was such a fool. But you know, don't you? I have no secrets from you anymore. You know. What do I know? Dumbledore turned his whole body to face Harry, and tears still sparkled in the brilliantly blue eyes. Master of Death, Harry, Master of Death. Was I better ultimately than Voldemort? Of course you were, said Harry. Of course. How can you ask that? You never killed if you could avoid it. True, said Dumbledore. And he was like a child seeking reassurance. Yet I too sought a way to conquer death, Harry. Not the way he did, said Harry. After all his anger at Dumbledore, how odd it was to sit here beneath the high-vaulted ceiling and defend Dumbledore from himself. Hallows, not Horcruxes. Hallows, murmured Dumbledore. Not Horcruxes. Precisely. There was a pause. The creature behind them whimpered, but Harry no longer looked around. Grindelwald was looking for them too. He asked. Dumbledore closed his eyes for a moment and nodded. It was the thing above all that drew us together, he said quietly. Two clever, arrogant boys with a shared obsession. We wanted to come to Godric's Hollow, as I'm sure you have guessed, because of the grave of Ignatius Peverell. We wanted to explore the place the third brother had died. So it's true, asked Harry. All of it. The Peverell brothers were the three brothers of the tale, said Dumbledore, nodding. Oh, yes, I think so. When they met death on a lonely road, I think it more likely that the Peverell brothers were simply gifted, dangerous wizards who succeeded in creating those powerful objects. The story of them being Death's and Hallows seems to me the sort of legend that might have sprung up around such creations. The cloak, as you know, as you now know, traveled through the ages, father to son, mother to daughter, right down to Ignatius' last living descendant, who was born, as Ignatius was, in the village of Patrick's Hollow. Dumbledore smiled at Harry. Me? You have guessed, I know, why the cloak was in my possession the night your parents said. James had showed it to me just a few days previously. It explained much of his undetected wrongdoing at school. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. I asked to borrow it, to examine it. I had long since given up my dream of uniting the Hallows, but I couldn't resist. Couldn't help taking a closer look. It was a cloak the likes of which I had never seen, immensely old, perfect in every respect. And then your father died, and had two Hallows at last, all to myself. His tone was unbearably bitter. The cloak wouldn't have helped him survive, though, Harry said quickly. Dumbledore knew what my mum and dad were. The cloak couldn't have made them curse-proof. True, sighed Dumbledore. True. Harry waited, but Dumbledore didn't speak, so he prompted him. So you've given up looking for the Hallows when you saw the cloak? Oh, yes, said Dumbledore faintly. It seemed that he forced himself to meet Harry's eyes. You know what happened. You cannot despise me more than I despise myself. But I don't despise you. Then you should, said Dumbledore. He drew a deep breath. You know the secret of my sister's ill health. What those muggles did, what she became. You know how my poor father sought revenge and paid the price. Died in Azkaban. You know how my mother gave up her own life to care for Aaron. I resented it, Harry. Dumbledore stated baldly, coldly. He was now looking over the top of Harry's head into the distance. I was gifted, brilliant. I wanted to escape, to shine. I wanted glory. Do not misunderstand me, he said, and the pain crossed his face so that he looked ancient again. I loved them. I loved my parents, my brother, and my sister. But I was selfish, Harry. More selfish than you, who is a remarkably selfless person, could possibly imagine. So that when my mother died and I was left to the responsibility of a damaged sister and a wayward brother, I returned to my village in anger and bitterness. Trapped and wasted, I thought. And then, of course, he came. Dumbledore looked directly into Harry's eyes again. Grindelwald, you cannot imagine how his ideas caught me, Harry. Inflamed me. Muggles forced into subservience. We wizards triumphant. Grindelwald and I, the glorious young leaders of the Revolution. While I had a few scribbles, I assuaged my conscience with empty words. It would be all for the greater good, and any harm done would be repaid 100-fold in benefits for wizards. Did I know in my heart of hearts what color Grindelwald was? I think I did, but I closed my eyes. If the plans we were making came to fruition, all my dreams would come true. And at the heart of our schemes, the Deathly Hallows. How they fascinated him. How they fascinated both of us. The unbeatable wand. The weapon that would lead us to power. The resurrection stone. To him, though I pretended not to know it, it meant an army of inferi. To me, I confess, it meant the return of my parents, and lifting of all responsibility from my shoulders. Hugs for Dumbledore. And the cloak. Somehow we never discussed the cloak much, Harry. Both of us could conceal ourselves well enough without it. The true magic of which, of course, that it can be used to protect and shield others as well as its owner. I thought that if we ever found it, it might be useful in hiding Ariana. But our interest in the cloak was mainly that it completed the trio. For the legend said that the man who united all three objects would then be truly master of death, which we took to mean invincible. Invincible masters of death, Grindelwald and Dumbledore. 2 months of insanity, cruel dreams, and neglect of only the 2 members of my family left to me. And then, you know what happened. Reality returned in the form of my rough, unlettered, and infinitely more admirable brother. I didn't want to hear the truth he shouted at me. I didn't want to hear that I couldn't set forth to seek Hallows with a fragile and unstable sister in tow. The argument became a fight. Grindelwald lost control. That which I had always sensed in him, though I pretended not to, now sprang into terrible pain. And Ariana, after all my mother's care and caution, lay dead upon the floor. Dumbledore gave a little gasp and began to cry in earnest. Harry reached out and was glad to find that he could touch him. He gripped his arm tightly, and Dumbledore gradually regained control. But Grindelwald fled, as anyone but I could have predicted. He vanished, with his plans for seizing power, his schemes for Muggle torture, his dreams of the Deathly Hallows, dreams in which I encouraged and dreams in which I had encouraged and helped him with. He ran while I was up to bury my sister. I learned to live with my guilt, my terrible grief, and the price of my shame. Years passed. There were rumors about him. He said he had procured a wand of immense power. Meanwhile, I was offered the post of Minister of Magic, not once but several times. Naturally, I refused. I learned that I was not to be trusted with power. But you'd have been better, much better than Flutter Scrimgeour, burst out Harry. Would I? Asked Dumbledore heavily. I'm not so sure. I had proven as a very young man that power was my weakness and my temptation. It is a curious thing, Harry. But perhaps those who are best suited to power are those who have never sought it. A lot of modern politicians need to listen to that. But I don't think they will. Those who, like you, have leadership thrust upon them, and take up the mantle because they must, finding to their own surprise that they wear it well. I was safer at Hogwarts. I think I was a good teacher. You were the best! You were very kind, Harry. But while I busied myself with the training of young wizards, Grindelwald was raising it on me. They say he feared me, and perhaps he did, but less I think than I feared him. Oh, not death, said Dumbledore in answer to Harry's questioning look. Not with what he could do to me magically. I knew that we were evenly matched. Perhaps that I was a shade more skillful. It was the truth I feared. You see, I never knew which of us, in that last horrific fight, had actually cast the curse that killed my sister. You may call me cowardly, and you would be right. Harry, I dreaded beyond all things the knowledge of that it had been. If I had brought about her death, not merely through my arrogance and my stupidity, but that I actually struck the blow that snuffed out her life. I think he knew it. I think he knew what frightened me. I delayed meeting him until finally it would have been too shameful to resist any longer. People were dying and he seemed unstoppable. I had to do what I could. Well, you know what happened next. I won the duel. I won the wand. Another silence. Harry didn't ask whether Dumbledore had ever found out who struck Ariana dead. He didn't want to know, and even less did he want Dumbledore to have to tell him. At last he knew what Dumbledore would have seen when he looked in the mirror of Erised, and why Dumbledore had been so understanding of the fascination it had exercised over Harry. They sat in silence for a long time, and the whimperings of the creature behind them barely disturbed Harry anymore. At last he said, Grindelwald tried to stop Voldemort from going after the wand. He lied, you know, pretended that he never had it. Dumbledore nodded, looking down at his lap, tears still glittering on his crooked nose. Oh, that's for Dumbledore. They say he showed remorse in his later years, alone in his cell at Nuremberg. I hope that it is true. I would like to think he did feel the horror and shame of what he had done. Perhaps that light of Voldemort was his attempt to make amends, to prevent Voldemort from taking the Hallow. Or maybe from breaking into your tomb, suggested Harry, and Dumbledore dabbed his eyes. After another short pause, Harry said, "You tried to use the resurrection stone." Dumbledore nodded. When I discovered it after all those years, buried in the invented home of the Cons, the Hallow that I had craved most of all, though in my youth I had wanted it for very different reasons. I lost my head, Harry. I had quite forgot that it was now a Horcrux, that the ring was sure to carry a curse. I picked it up and put it on. For a second, I imagined that I was about to see Ariana, my mother, and my father, to tell them how very, very sorry I was. I was such a fool, Harry. After all those years, I had learned nothing. I was unworthy to unite with the Deathly Hallows. I had proved it time and time again. Here was final proof. Why, said Harry, it was natural. I wanted to see them again. What's wrong with that? Only a man in a million could unite the Hallows, Harry. I was fit only to possess the means of them, the least extraordinary. I was fit to own the outer wand, and not to boast of it, and not to kill with it. I was permitted to tame and use it, because I took it, but not for gain, but to save others from it. But the cloak I took out of vain curiosity, so that it could never have worked for me as it works for you, its true owner. The stone I would have used in an attempt to drag back those who are at peace, rather than enable my self-sacrifice as you did. You are the worthy possessor of the Hallows. Dumbledore patted Harry's hand, and Harry looked up at the old man and smiled. He couldn't help himself. How could he remain angry with Dumbledore now? Why do you have to make it so difficult? Why did you have to make it so difficult? Dumbledore's smile was tremulous. I'm afraid I counted on Miss Granger to slow you up, Harry. I was afraid that your hot head might dominate your good heart. I was scared that if presented outright with the facts about those tempting objects, you might seize the Hallows as I did, at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. If you laid hands on them, I wanted you to possess them safely. You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die, and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying. And Voldemort never knew about the Hallows. I don't think so, because he didn't recognize the resurrection stone he turned into a Horcrux. But even if he had known about them, Harry, I doubt that he would have been interested in any except the first. He would not think that he needed the cloak. And as for the stone, for whom would he want to bring back from the dead? He fears the dead. He does not love. But you expected him to go after the wand. I have been sure that he would try, ever since your wand was in the graveyard of Mrs. Pendleton. At first he was afraid that you had conquered him by superior skill. Once he had kidnapped Ollivander, however, he discovered the existence of the twin dwarfs. He thought that explained everything. Yet the borrowed wand did no better against yours. So Voldemort, instead of asking himself what quality it was in you that had made your wand so strong, what gift you possessed that he did not, naturally set out to find the one wand that they said would beat any other. For him, the other one has become an obsession to rival his obsession with you. He believes that the elder one removes his last weakness and makes him truly invincible. Poor Severus. If you planned your death with Snape, you meant to end him up with the other one, didn't you? I admit that was my intention, said Dumbledore. But it didn't work as I intended, did it? No, said Harry. That bit didn't work out. The creature behind them burst and moaned, leaving Harry and Dumbledore to sit without talking for the longest time yet. The realization of what would happen next gradually settled over Harry in long minutes, like softly falling snow. Ooh, I love snowy weather. It's so peaceful. Just not when it's super cold. That's not a good thing. But moving on. I've got to go back, haven't I? That is up to you. I've got a choice. Oh, yes. Dumbledore smiled at him. You're in King's Cross, you say? I think that if you decided not to go back, you would be able to, let's say, board a train. And where would it take me? On. On, said Dumbledore simply. Silence again. Voldemort's got the other one. Voldemort's got the other one. Voldemort has the other one. But you want me to go back? I think, said Dumbledore, that if you choose to return, there is a chance that it may be finished for good. I can't promise it. But I know this, Harry, that you have less to fear from returning here than he does. Harry glanced again at the raw-looking thing that trembled and choked in the shadow beneath the distant chair. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all, those who live without love. By returning, you may ensure that fewer souls are maimed. Fewer families are torn apart. If that seems to you a worthy goal, then we say goodbye for the present. Harry nodded and sighed. Leaving this place wouldn't be nearly as hard as walking into the forest had been. but it was warm, light, and peaceful here. He, he knew that he was heading back to pain and the fear of more loss. He stood up and Dumbledore did the same, and they looked at each other for one moment into each other's faces. "Tell me one last thing," said Harry. "Is this real? Or has this been happening inside my head?" Dumbledore beamed at him, and his voice sounded wan and strong in Harry's ears, even though the bright mist was descending again, obscuring his figure. "Of course it is happening inside your head. Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean it's not real?" And indeed, sometimes the inner world is so much more richer than the present world. But that doesn't make it any less of a reality. It just needs to be manifested first. But that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for chapter 36, The Flaw in the Plan. Until then, bye!